Did Councillor Madden manage to get in?
I'm here.
Ah.
Good morning, Chair. Meeting is now live.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome. I'm Councillor Claire Udy and I'm Chair of the Licensing Committee. This meeting is being held virtually in response to the limitations placed on governments by the COVID-19 pandemic. The City Solicitor has advised that this meeting will be run by reference to the model standing orders as set out in the Local Authorities Coronavirus Flexibility of Local Authorities Meetings Regulations 2020 number 392. Members of the public are invited to view this meeting and there has been opportunity for written deputations to be submitted. Please can members keep their cameras on throughout the meeting but turn the microphones off when you are not speaking. Officers, please only turn on your cameras when you are speaking. If anyone would like to speak, please write your name and RTS request to speak in the chat function. Each time you speak, please say who you are so it's clear who is speaking. Could members now introduce themselves? Councillor Scott Pater Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Vice Chair of the Committee, Councillor Scott Pater Harris. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dave Ashmore.
Dave Ashmore, one of the councillors for Fratton Ward.
Good morning. Councillor Chris Atwell.
Good morning, Chair. Chris Atwell, present.
Councillor Tom Coles.
Good Chair, Councillor Tom Coles, present.
Thank you. Councillor Jason Fasakali.
Yes, present. I'm on my phone, but I'm trying to get it to switch across to my PC, so I might get a picture later on, but I'm here.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor John Ferret.
Councillor John Ferret.
Cool, thank you. Councillor George Fielding.
Morning, Chair. Councillor George Fielding, present. Thank you.
Good morning. Councillor Hannah Hockaday.
Chair, if I may, Councillor Hockaday is just text me and she is just logging in.
Okay, cool. I shall come back to her in a moment. Councillor Leo Madden.
Councillor Leo Madden here.
Thank you. Councillor Lee Mason is on his way. We'll come back in a second to that. Councillor Robert New.
Good morning, Chair. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Benedict Swan.
Morning, Madam Chair. Councillor Benedict Swan, Copner and Anchorage Park Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Linda Symes.
Councillor Linda Symes, present, Chair.
Thank you. I have received apologies about 5 minutes ago from Councillor Vernon Jackson due to a little thing. So I'm just going to go on to officers now. Thank you. And I'll come back to the remaining members at the end of this. Councillor Nikki Humphreys, Licensing Manager.
Good morning, members. Nikki Humphreys, Licensing Manager for Portsmouth City Council.
Oh, yeah. Ross Lee, Licensing Officer.
Good morning, members. Ross Lee, one of Nikki's licensing officers.
Good morning. Ben Atchell, our legal advisor.
Good morning, everybody. Ben Attrell, Solicitor.
Hello. Sam Whitfield, Technical Transport Planner.
Good morning, everybody. Sam Whitfield, Technical Transport Planner.
Is Pam Turton in, Assistant Director of Transport and Regen?
Morning, yes, Pam Turton here today.
Hello. Hayley Trower, Air Quality Lead for Transport.
Good morning, I'm Hayley, I'm the Air Quality Lead.
Thank you. Erica Stiles, Air Quality Engagement Officer.
Good morning. Sorry, apologies. Thank you, Chair. Good morning. My mic wouldn't unmute. Yes, Erica Stiles, Engagement Officer, present. Thank you.
Thank you. Erica Stiles. No, not again. Same again. Lisa Gallagher, Local Democracy Officer.
Good morning, Lisa Gallagher, present.
Thank you very much. I see a stray Tristan Samuels in the room. Did you want to say hello?
Good morning, members. Tristan Samuels, Director of Regeneration.
I also advise that Councillor Lynn Stagg might be here to observe, but I can't see her on the little thingamadoogies at the bottom. We're waiting for Councillor Huckaday and Lee Mason, and I'm trying to go slow enough for them to be here at this present moment. Are there any apologies for absence apart from Councillor Vernon Jackson at all? I don't think there is there?
No, Chair, no other apologies.
Thank you very much. Members, are there any declarations of any interests?
Oh, hang on. Like I did last time.
Yeah.
I need to put my camera on. Like I did last time, I have to mention that I'm an Environment Cabinet member, which obviously some of my portfolio covers Clean Air Zone, which is connected with this. Again, it's a personal thing, but not a prejudicial thing, I'm advised.
I see Lee Mason.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Could you just
Excellent.
introduce yourself?
I will be having video soon. I'm just on a tablet at the moment while I'm waiting for the computer to load up. I've had to come down to the Civic because I'm sure it's a conspiracy. Every time I try and attend a meeting, it goes wrong, whereas it works fine the rest of the time when I don't need to at a meeting. But I'm with you and I can hear you. So.
Thank you very much. Could you just introduce yourself briefly, and do you have any declarations of interest?
Councillor Lee Mason, Caution Ward, no declarations of interest.
Thank you very much. Dave, I'll take your declaration of interest. I guess all three Cabinet oppositionals, Environment and Climate Change are here as well, so good morning. So then, I'm going to move on to agenda item number 3, which is the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Matters Amendments to the Statement of Licensing Policy. First of all, I would like Erica Stiles to read out the deputation that has been submitted from Bruce Hall from Aquacars. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just trying to turn my camera on. There we go. Bruce Hall, can you all hear me okay? Yep, great, thank you. Bruce Hall, General Manager of Aquacars, supported by the National Private Hire Association, has provided the following responses to the report presented to committee today. Starting with paragraph 3.1, part 1. We question the actual benefit of this requirement based on the simplest of facts that Euro 6 was introduced in 2015, which means that any vehicle currently 5 years old, 6 years old by the time of implementation of these suggested changes, will be of exactly the same Euro emissions standards. The only thing the stipulation will achieve is higher costs to the trade. Paragraph 3.1, part 2. We question this requirement on the basis of newer vehicles do not deteriorate in the same manner as they once did. Having a stipulation of 4 years entry, 8 years maximum, will result in many drivers being forced to take on finance to purchase the newer vehicles, especially with the push towards the highly expensive electric vehicles. Those finance packages run for 60 months, 5 years, with only a licensing life of 4 years, from 4 years old to 8 years old. This would result on vehicles still remaining on finance despite being too old to relicense, effectively pricing the entire industry out of the market. Entry age limit should be minimum 6 years, if not 7, with exit age limits of 10 or preferably 12 years, as is the case with several other local authorities throughout the UK. This would allow for a second-hand market to develop. It would allow time for the creation and improvement of the currently grossly inadequate charging infrastructure and allow time for better battery technology to be developed, which would lead to better mileage range of electric vehicles. Moving on to paragraph 3.2. With the greatest of respect, we simply cannot pull any punches here. Paragraph 3.3. A greater amount simply must be allocated and granted, not loaned, to the entire industry if the Council is mindful for the migration towards electric vehicles to be successful. Without such support, the industry will be forced into oblivion based on lack of financial viability and affordability. Although we do accept that this has to be on a pro rata basis, based on the price difference of the vehicles, which is based on the saloon vehicles priced at circa £30,000 versus the LEVC wheelchair accessible equivalent priced at £56,000 to £70,000 per vehicle. Moving on to paragraph 4.5. This could be deemed to be misrepresentation here. Only a very small number of local authorities have been instructed to introduce measures to improve the air quality, not as stated here, take legal action, which would suggest prosecutions for failures or breaches of legal limits, versus the reality, which is to introduce measures to address the air quality levels. Can everyone still hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on to comment on wave 1. Birmingham have introduced clean air zones charges on all road users, which includes the general public. Leeds has avoided such charging zones by instead going down the route of traffic calming measures. Moving on to wave 2 and wave 3. Many of these are actually combined authorities. For example, North Tyneside, South Tyneside, Sunderland, Newcastle upon Tyne, Gateshead, Middlesbrough are parts of the 12 districts within the North East Combined Strategic Authority. Bury, Bolton, Salford, Oldham, Trafford, Manchester, Stockport, Tameside are out of the 10 which makes up transport for Greater Manchester. So you see, this list could and should have been simplified to provide a true reflection of the situation here. Moving on to 4.6. 4.9 and 4.10. We would have liked to see the report to show actual up-to-date readings locally here in order to demonstrate the need to introduce charging zones, since the directives also included monitor and adjust accordingly. Paragraph 4.12. We would disagree. The national database is a requirement for all local authorities to feed into and have access to, since the exemptions are set locally by each local authority. Without access to this database, the charging systems become unreliable. Moving on to 4.16. See response to 4.9 above. Here is the answer to the actual NOx levels. They are, as quoted here, yet to be validated, which effectively means that this whole proposal is based on data which is not yet verified. 4.17 is the area referred to here. I see no reference at all here to the financial impact of coronavirus on the taxi and private hire industry at all within this section. This is a licensing committee meeting, not a car sales forecast meeting, which begs the question of relevance of this entire section here. Could it be an attempt to cloud the judgment of the committee? Moving on to 4.19, this entire paragraph can be very quickly, affordably and efficiently rectified simply by allowing current Euro emissions standards or equivalent, which then allows for aftermarket devices to be utilised, which can not only bring any vehicle in line with Euro 6 emissions, but also improve on the emissions standards of Euro 6 for a total cost of £459, fully installed and proven to be very effective. Moving on to 5.5, we would strongly disagree with this conclusion and instead point out that the older vehicles referred to here have no bearing on any licensed vehicles, since the age restrictions of licensed vehicles all stipulate that the vehicle must be Euro 6 emission standards, having been introduced in 2015. The older vehicles referred to here are actually residential vehicles. This is intentional misdirection. Paragraph 5.8 comment. It is highly recommended to note here that the 29% referred to will all be coming off fleet in the very near future, if they haven't already. Even with a 10-year exit age limit, they will all be replaced with Euro 6 compliant vehicles by 2025 at the latest. This renders the entire fleet 100% compliant within a maximum of 4 years, currently 2 years with the 8-year exit age limit. With this in mind, might we suggest that the age limit be extended to 10 years for all Euro 6 or equivalent compliant vehicles, with the exception of vehicles that are not Euro 6 emissions or equivalent. This will allow the extra time for those with the newer vehicles and allow for aftermarket equipment to be installed into any currently non-compliant vehicles, thereby giving all licence holders enough breathing space or a stepping stone to allow for compliance in the shortest possible time, whilst remaining within the regulator's code stipulation of making compliance affordable. Moving on to 5.9. Let us be very clear here. The government will grant the council £500,000 to install some plug sockets on the condition that the taxi and private hire industry are forced to pay a lot more than this in order to comply with council imposed conditions on them, which will cost the trade in the region of £43.56 million. Does that seem fair, reasonable or proportionate? 5.10. Maths time. 604,500 divided by 1,089 equals 555.09. £56,000 minus 555.09 equals 55,444.91. That's a mortgage, which many will not qualify for, which will result in the demand being insufficient, which removes the option of the additional £70.24 per vehicle, in brackets the £76,500 divided by 1,089. Moving on to 5.11. This still leaves a bill of over £40,000 per vehicle, 43.56 million across the industry, rendering this suggestion a direct breach of the regulator's code. 5.12, with an exit age limit of 10 years, the policy is already in line, in fact far more restrictive than government legislation. Taking a more common sense approach would be far more supportive for the trade. Moving on to 6.3, but it is most certainly one of the most restrictive, being in the lower end of the scale at 4 years, none of which have any bearing whatsoever on emissions since Euro 6 was introduced in 2015, which effectively means anything less than 6 years old from date of implementation would naturally be compliant, rendering a 4-year entry age limit nothing more than an additional and unnecessary expense to the local trade. Finally, with regards to paragraph 6.4, Mr. Hall notes, Rossendale Borough Council's policy states, 4.5, age of vehicles. With effect from 20th of February 2017, completed applications for a new vehicle licence will only normally be accepted in respect of vehicles that are less than 5 years of age from the date of first registration, or are less than 7 years of age where an approved conversion kit has been installed on the vehicle, reducing its emissions to within the current Euro standard, as amended from time to time. Once licensed, vehicles will be allowed to be licensed up to the 10th anniversary of the date of first registration. In the case of vehicles classed as a minibus on their registration document and any purpose-built hackney carriage, they will be licensed up to the 12th anniversary of the date of first registration. Mr. Hall then provides a link to an approved conversion kit. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. 2 seconds before we move on to Councillor Hannah Hockaday. I was just going to say the deputation that was sent to me was written in blue and red, and it was made out that the blue bits were from Aquacar and the black bits might have been from the National Private Hire Association. Members, I trust that you have read this deputation and seen what bits are in what place. Is that okay? Thank you. Councillor Hannah Hockaday, thank you for your attendance today. I might ask you to recall the last licensing policy meeting where Leo Madden claimed that he was in from the beginning and I still said that he couldn't speak during this item. I am very, very sorry, but I'm going to exclude you from this item, but you are welcome to stay and listen to the discussion today.
Chairman, she was here because she was listening to it on the thing.
I know, but the last meeting when Councillor Robert New told me that I had to exclude Leo Madden because I excluded Robert New, Councillor New on a previous time, and I think it's just consistency at this point. She joined the meeting after the deputation had started, and I do apologise, but I don't want to risk loads of code of conduct from other people coming and Councillor Madden getting upset by accepting someone coming in the meeting late as well after last time.
Chair, if I may indulge you quickly, I've spoken to the monitoring officer about this because it troubles me because I don't want to exclude members, and the monitoring officer's view is you can be absent but while you can be taking a view, so you have an ability to engage. So if you want to take some advice from the monitoring officer on this issue, I think it would be best to do so now.
Well, can we get him in the meeting then? If not, I'll take advice.
If you can, it's just I actually wanted to talk to you about this before you went in, because the monitoring officer spoke to on a personal level about this, because I was a bit worried that we were excluding members, and I know that Councillor Madden, I suspect, probably spoke to the monitoring officer as well, knowing that the way the code of conduct works. But I think you should probably speak to the monitoring officer, especially as the item officially hasn't started and it was only a deputation, which is already in writing. And if I recall back to full council, Councillor Fazackley had a similar issue where he could take a view whether to engage or not. So I would go and speak to the monitoring officer on this before you proceed.
I was going to say this isn't High Court about precedent here. So Ben Actual, can we have some advice before we phone up Peter and get him to join the meeting?
Hello, Councillor and Chair. Obviously, if members have been speaking with the monitoring officer direct, I'm not party to those conversations. I don't know what's been said, but previously my advice has been that it's your discretion. And I think you felt on the last occasion that you were bound by having treated a member in a particular way on a previous occasion, and in order to be consistent, it's not a matter of precedent. But it's your discretion as to whether you allow a member in once the meeting's been commenced. I can't really advise any further than that. but I think it might well be worth checking with the monitoring officer to see what his view is and if there's anything that can be added to that.
Thank you very much. Peter, could you phone Peter Balfe, please, and get him to join a meeting? I don't know if is he in today. I don't know. If not, could we have the deputy monitoring officer in?
I'll have a go now, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm willing to break until he comes back. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, for the interruption, but yeah, if Peter Balfe is available, I've spoken to him twice this morning already.
That's fine, but I'd like to be informed of these conversations before a meeting starts, considering, like I said, Councillor Madden came in late last time and he said that he heard the whole of the deputation request and the beginning of the item, and I still excluded him from the meeting. And I am aware that there might be some people that were upset about this, but I can't do it again and allow someone else to sit in when someone else was excluded last time.
No, that's perfectly understandable, Chair. I understand your position. I assume that you would have had this dealt with, but unfortunately not.
No.
Chair, if I may, I think it will be helpful though to have this discussion now and to get this clarified so that it's clear going forward what the position is and all the members of the committee are aware precisely what the situation is, and then hopefully it will avoid this cropping up in the future.
Thank you very much.
We're just trying to get hold of Peter Balfe now. I'll just put the adjournment slide up while we wait, if that's okay, Chair.
Councillor Udy, are you present?
Yeah, I'll call him now.
Thank you.
Hello everyone, are we ready to resume?
Yes, Chair.
Cool, I'll give you like 30 seconds in case someone's making a cup of tea or something. I do apologise. Right then, is everyone back? Hello then. So I've taken advice from the city solicitor over the phone. He apologises is that he did have some advice that he was drawn up basically after chats with Councillor Madden and Councillor Peter Harris that was just going to be overseen by the legal advisor, but it hasn't been circulated yet, so I was not informed. So at the moment I'm willing to let Councillor Hannah Hockaday sit. And that advice will be circulated soon, members, maybe not before the new year, but I wasn't privy to it at all, so I do apologise. But apparently you could probably just show up halfway through the meeting if you told me you've read the papers and heard the deputation as well, so because it's not in our standing orders and just vote and leave, so maybe we have to look at processes around that as well. So thank you very much. Councillor Hannah Hockaday, could you introduce yourself and do you have any declarations of interest?
Hello. No, I don't have any declarations of interest. Thank you, Councillor Rudy.
Thank you.
It's Councillor Hannah Hockaday, Cosham Ward.
Thank you very much. So now we'll move on to Sam Whitfield to present his report.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I've just prepared a few quick slides, which I'll just share. Can people see that?
I can.
I can.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So yes, I've just prepared a few slides today just to talk about the changes that have been made to the report and to clearly set out what we are asking of you today, members, just in terms of decisions. So without further ado, as we discussed last week, Portsmouth has illegal levels of air pollution, so it is the cause of around 95 deaths a year and countless instances of ill health. We've been mandated to reduce these levels as soon as possible, and the tool which government has told us we need to use is a Class B clean air zone, under which non-compliant taxis and private hire vehicles will be charged £10 for every day that they enter the zone. Last year, Cabinet recommended that we introduce changes to licensing requirements in order to make the CAS work effectively. And so to that effect, a paper was presented on Friday the 4th of December to this committee. However, members felt that the report was lacking detail in certain areas and wanted reassurances with regard to the length of sunset periods being offered to wheelchair accessible vehicles. So the recommendations remain unchanged, and they are that the licensing committee approve the proposed amendments to the statement of licensing policy as follows: that as a matter of local policy and condition for both hackney carriage and private hire vehicle licenses, all private hire and hackney carriage vehicles presented for initial licensing shall be under 4 years of age at first licensing, and that any vehicle may be relicensed until 4 years of age, providing the vehicle meets with the requirements of the PATN guidance as approved by the Council and is supported by an evidence service history in line with the manufacturer's guidelines, and that the upper age limit for licensed vehicles to come into effect on the 1st of January 2022. It was proposed last time, and carrying that forward, that this be amended to that the upper age limit for licensed vehicles is to come into effect on the 1st of January 2022. The second recommendation is that the following statement be attached to the statement of licensing policy, that in order to secure £500,000 for rapid EV charging points, specifically for use by the hackney carriage and private hire fleet, that all newly licensed vehicles be zero emissions capable from the 1st of January 2025. And the final recommendation is that the Licensing Committee endorses the proposal that officers will seek to negotiate a restructuring of funding from central government's Joint Air Quality Unit and that a greater amount of funding be allocated to wheelchair accessible vehicles. So just to, I guess, set out the differences between current policy and what we're recommending. In terms of newly licensed vehicles, that there is an existing 4-year age limit for newly licensed vehicles. We're proposing that up until 2025 there be no change, and this will remain the case. But from the 1st of January 2025, that we include that requirement for vehicles to be zero emissions capable. Sorry, that's newly licensed vehicles only. Now, zero emissions capable doesn't mean fully electric. It can be, but an awful lot of hybrid vehicles also fall into that category. And again, they don't need to be new vehicles. They can be second-hand, so long as they are also under 4 years of age. In terms of relicensing, that there is currently no maximum age limit, and we are recommending that there be an 8-year maximum age limit be introduced, which is the same as was in place prior to 2019. This is the only recommendation that will impact existing licensed vehicles, as the other recommendation only applies to new vehicles coming onto the road. In terms of changes to the report, in paragraphs 411 to 412, there's additional discussion as to how the clean air zone operates. I know a couple of weeks ago we discussed how contraventions are actually captured and how the system decides which vehicles are compliant or not. So there's just discussion of how that is done centrally. In paragraphs 413 to 419, it discusses the impact of coronavirus on the Portsmouth CAS and why government is still instructing us to proceed with this, essentially, the rationale behind that. In paragraph 817, we discuss a little bit more information on how we've been continuing to engage with the trade and how we've currently engaged with about 10% of the trade, with a bias towards those who are non-compliant and those who will be most affected by these changes. We've provided more information on the rapid charging points that we could purchase, so in terms of charge time and the range of vehicles and the future cost of electric vehicles. That's in paragraphs 916 to 920. And in paragraphs 1019 to 1025, there's just a bit more contextual information about the size of various taxi and private hire fleets that other authorities operate, and the financial support that they are offering to their fleets. Just again, to avoid any confusion, it's just worth breaking down as well. I know the CAS is kind of multifaceted, but there are two pots of money. That there is the £604,000, which is to be provided to individual non-compliant vehicle owners, of which there are 321 in the city, and there is practically enough to offer £1,500 for every standard taxi and £4,000 for every wheelchair accessible vehicle. Now, there was some talk about a prolonged sunset period for wheelchair accessible vehicles, so that's essentially a time limited exemption, but a decision was taken under delegated authority by Cabinet that we would only offer a 6-month sunset period, because a longer one would a longer one would result in the government not giving us the money for wheelchair accessible vehicles to upgrade, because they wouldn't be deemed as being in sufficient need of that money. So in addition to that, and in that same decision undertaken under delegated authority by Cabinet, we've also going back to government and asking for up to £15,000 per wheelchair accessible vehicle. As I said a minute ago, currently £4,000 has been secured, and that is not in danger of being lost, but we are requesting more. that decision has already been taken. What this paper today is kind of discussing is whether or not we seek to secure £500,000 of funding from central government for rapid EV charging points, specifically for use by the trade and in places where they would find it useful. So together, those first two recommendations in particular, the approval of the recommendation for newly licensed vehicles to be zero emissions capable from 2025, working hand in hand with an 8-year age limit for vehicles, would strengthen our case and enable us to secure that money from government. And that is the decision faced by the licensing committee today. I guess just to finish off, I know zero emissions capable it sounds electric, but just to reassure you that it is not exclusively electric. Here's just a few examples of mostly hybrid vehicles that could also operate under that banner, and there is a big long list. I think TfL have done some work and drawn it up, but it is by no means exclusively electric. There are some more reasonably priced hybrid vehicles that would come under that heading. So that's the presentation. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to answer any queries.
Thank you very much, Sam. Dave's in there. I will take members' questions now. Councillor Ashmore.
Hi, not on mute, am I?
No.
Good. Thanks for that, Sam. And I think it puts it in a more what do you call it, like a stark what the choices are here, what the decisions are. I think it would be accurate to say that it's about two things. It's about the illegal air quality that we've got, the illegal air quality in certain areas we've got, and two, it's about fighting for money for the trade. We're trying to fight to get more funding for the trade. So I think those are the two things that we've got to look at the lens on as a committee, and I don't think we could really argue about any of those points there. So just to clarify on that, the Euro 6, the stuff about Euro 6 compliant vehicles, it doesn't mean the vehicle has to be Euro 6, does it? It just means it has to be compliant to those levels. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, so for a diesel vehicle, it will need to be at least Euro 6.
And for petrol, Euro
4.
4, yeah.
Which is much older, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm just trying to marry what's in the report to what's in Bruce's deputation there, because I think Bruce has put a very eloquent, as he usually does, he puts his eloquent case across, he fights for his trade, etc. So I'm just trying to address some of that, and I noticed that in the deputation it said that Leeds managed to avoid a CAS, a clean air zone, through better traffic management. But I think how Leeds also did it was because it managed to upgrade the vehicles faster as well. So essentially, while traffic management was part of that, there's nothing different from what we're trying to do as a council to try and find it, with better traffic management. That is in the plans, but also to upgrade. We're basically trying to do what Leeds did, but we're not going to be able to get there as quick. So that, I just want to see you're not in there, so I assume that I'm in the right ballpark on that one. So basically, that's why we're trying to get funding, and it will be a grant, not a loan, that we're fighting for, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's be interesting for the trade as well, because, a loan is going to, especially after Corona and all that, it's going to impact the trade more, so that's good. And I think when it said about and the deputation mentioned about we're not under legal obligation, I think we are, because it's a ministerial directive is the legal obligation. It is the legal, what do you call it? The legal point of it. And especially, as I brought up last time, there was that, was it the inquiry into the death of the 9-year-old girl in London, Ella Kissy Deborah there, I think, and now we've seen the result from that. And we could now see, now that legally air pollution is seen to have contributed to the death of someone, we could have other, cases come in, and for the same thing. So this is essentially about protecting the residents here, as well as, you know, making sure that the council is committed and has cleaner air as a priority. So, you know, it's the human cost as well. It's a public health issue. And so this is something that we need to figure in as we make these decisions. And also, I was interested when on the deputation it said that I can't remember what he said now. Was it let me look at it. Some of the data wasn't yet validated, but I think that's because we're still waiting for December to end. The data that's reflected is the data for 2019. Would I be right in?
Yeah. The 2019 data shows that we are in exceedance of air pollution levels. All the 2020 data shows is that essentially it's validated once you've got the whole year worth, and it's validated in the new year. So that's all it means essentially.
Okay, because I know that during the lockdown period we had very clear air for a style, didn't we? Apart from particulates, funnily enough. But yeah, the air was better than it has been. But since the lockdown ended, it shot up back to normal levels, didn't it? And in some cases, even beyond what the normal levels were for whatever reason. Maybe a lot of delivery drivers shooting around, etc. But so yeah, that needs to be taken. It's not based on, you know, I just want to make clear it's not based on guessing. This is proper data, and the annual report is now on the website, isn't it? PCC website for people to have a look at.
The 2020 data won't be ready.
That won't. No,
year.
But
yeah,
you can see it is because while it does show that air quality is now going on the right trajectory, it's getting better. It's getting better now. But still, it's not going to reach fast enough to essentially avoid a clean air zone. It still needs to be done. So yeah, so it's getting better, and this is like the final push on it. That's all I want. So I just want to clarify those things and marry up what the deputation said. Get the thing off you. No, thank you very much, Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ashmore. Just before I go to you, Councillor Peter Harris, I just want to say, Councillor Ashmore, thank you for saying stuff and clarifying stuff, because you are Cabinet Member for Climate and Environment Change. I do not want this to turn into a political bun fight, though, so please try not to question Dave anymore at this point, please, because obviously we're looking at what the recommendations are and other stuff. So thank you, Councillor Peter Harris.
That's all right, Chair. Funny you say that just before you get to me, which makes you smile. No worries, Dave's free from any cross-examination today. It's just going to go back onto the deputation that Bruce put in, because actually I think Dave starts on a really good theme, to be honest. I think if you look at 3.1 in the report with the recommendations, and I think it's the first one that he says, obviously the matter of local policy and condition for Hackney garages and private hire vehicles for the licence of age 4 years. Bruce questions the actual benefit of the requirement based on the simple facts that Euro 6 was introduced in 2015, which means that any vehicle is currently 5 years old and 6 years old by the time of implementation. So basically what Bruce is saying, that by going to 4 years from the first licence is actually going to exclude some vehicles that are already, I would believe, already compliant. So would it make sense, Chair, I question why that is at 4 instead of what Bruce is saying at 6. Could any officer assist on that?
Yeah, so the requirement as existing is 4 years. That wouldn't be a change for the council. But also, I think it's worth bearing in mind, just within Euro 6 itself, that there is a huge range. So as time has gone on, there's like what's known as Euro 6B, C and D, and over time, the measure by which Euro 6 is, I guess, measured is strengthened. So the newer vehicles are more likely to be true Euro 6 than the older ones, if that makes sense.
It doesn't, Sam. If I mean, and please don't forgive me for questioning that, because obviously a vehicle that is Euro 6 is Euro 6, isn't it? It would be compliant within the law of the land. So I'm surely I'm of the right of saying that even if it is Euro 6, and regardless of when we move on, the vehicle's still going to be seen as a Euro 6 vehicle. So therefore, it'd be compliant within the clean air zone. If I'm wrong, just please tell me if I'm wrong. I don't mind.
Going to come in. I think Nikki's probably best placed to answer at this point, and then maybe Ross as well. Hello, Nikki.
Thanks. Actually, as Ross has raised his hand, we have had the discussion about where your policy for vehicle standards has originated from, which is entirely separate to the air quality measures. So it's separation in terms of why you as a council and you as a committee have instituted minimum standards for vehicles for some considerable number of time. So if you don't mind, can I let Ross give you some background on your policy on age, which is separate? Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, just to go through some of the statistics in relation to why you've always had an entry limit for vehicles. For the last 4 years, the garage examinations have shown analysis of vehicles by age group. And for example, vehicles that were over 3 years old in 2016 were failing the prescribed test at a rate of 63%. Compared to 48% for vehicles under 3 years old. In 2018, vehicles over 3 years old had a 29% failure rate. In 2019, a 24% failure rate. And in 2020 so far, a 34% failure rate for vehicles over 3 years old. So it's not just about emissions, it's about the state of the vehicle full stop in terms of its whole components, whether it's cosmetic or mechanical. And simply put, older vehicles fail the prescribed test more than younger vehicles. It's brutally as simple as that.
Thank you. Councillor Payne-Harris.
Okay, I appreciate that, Ross. Thank you. It's just more so for the guidance within the clean air zone. I think the point that that is being made by the deputy is not so much about whether they fail or not. It's more about whether they're going to be able to be compliant and ensuring that we get the best result for the trade. I mean, and I'm going to move on to the next point he makes, which actually is, I think, is more of a, I think it's probably the actual most important part of the deputation so far, which is if you go into 3.1 in the second paragraph. He obviously questions the newer vehicles do not deteriorate in the same manner as they once did. So I'd be interested to see your statistics, Ross, if you could send them over to me. I'd appreciate to have a look at those. And especially when he talks about finance packages running for 60 months, which is actually obviously a 5-year period. So with a licensing life of only 4 years, from 4 to 8, it would result obviously vehicles remaining on finance despite being too old to relicense. So effectively you're pricing the industry out of the market. I think that's a very, very good point, because what we could do here is ensure that certain drivers take on vehicles that are going to cost slightly more than they would normally pay, and then at the end of the paying period have a year where they can't license the vehicle and have to sell it on. So I think there is an argument here to allow the second-hand market to develop, as Bruce has actually outlined. So I would encourage members to obviously read that and take that view to what you feel. But that's the part of the report that I find quite compelling. But also on a point that Councillor Ashmore made earlier, and sorry, Dave, I'm not picking on you, please don't think I am. It's more about Appendix E when you mentioned about Leeds, and the support package that Leeds gave to the trade was significantly more from a loan perspective. They gave interest-free loans up to £10,000, but also the amount of funding that they actually had was considerably more as well. But I think if you take into context, they have 5,000 Hackney carriages and private hire vehicles, so they are a slightly larger authority, hence the level of funding. So while I think the comparison is a fair one, at the same time, I think there are elements that we need to be very much aware of, that to shape them in the same manner would be slightly different, especially in the fact they don't have to have a clean air zone now, which is quite annoying for us, but good for them. But I would just add that. But I would encourage members to look at the point that Bruce has made in the beginning of his deputation, because I think that there is some questions on age limits here that could be dealt with quite easily today. Thank you, Chair. That's all I've got for now. I'm sure I will have something back later.
Thank you. Sam's got his hand up. Hello, Sam.
Hi, Chair. I was just going to make a point just with regards to Leeds, and I accept that they did offer interest-free loans, but the take-up of grants was much higher. I think for every 5 grants there was 1 loan that was taken up, and loans is something that it's not something we're exploring now, because it is. When we ran our public consultation, the response was overwhelmingly that we prefer grants from the trade. But it is something that we are open to looking at in the future if there is a low uptake of grants.
Thank you very much. We have a stray Councillor Vernon Jackson who has just joined us. Wow, Councillor Vernon Jackson, you've already missed an eventful morning, but apparently if you can confirm to me that you have read the deputation and you have read the papers before the meeting today, you are able to participate within this meeting.
Thank you. My feeling is I've not been here for all the debate, and therefore on this item I should not be voting. But I thought I think that's just fair. But my previous meeting is now finished, which was difficult. But I thought I should come along and offer any help I can.
So you're here as an observer rather than someone that we can question, rather than an actual member of the licensing committee.
No, I'm here as a member of the licensing committee. But on the issue you're now debating, I should not vote, and I won't be.
That is very helpful, thank you. And hopefully people will not be asking questions of Councillor Vernon Jackson today to make things more complicated for me. Thank you. Councillor Leo Madden.
Thank you, Chair. I sat in the last meeting, although I wasn't allowed to participate in it, and I think we're back where we started 2 weeks ago. And politics being the art of the possible, I hope that we're going to leave today with some resolution rather than put everything back again. Because there are deadlines clearly that we have to meet, and we want to obtain money and all the rest of it. But I'd just like to ask one question, and I think it's related to, I couldn't get back in again to Bruce's deputation, I'm afraid, but I did read it the other night. And one of the things was, it's the age of vehicles that appear to be the problem, in a way, in the sense that the 4 years, and then the 8 years. So I'd just like to know from somebody, and I think we're going to have to compromise here today, a little bit like Brexit talks. But I think, I want to know what material difference it would make to what we are trying to do as a city if older vehicles could go up to 10 years, as I think Bruce suggested. I mean, I've read all the documentation. I do understand, that newer vehicles are less polluting and all the rest of it than older ones. But what material difference would it make if we said 10 years? Because they still had to be tested on a regular basis and all the rest of it for emissions. And if we did that, would it make any difference to our bids to get additional funding from government, particularly EV funding of $500,000? Those are my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Billion.
Used to deal with billions, Joe, as you can imagine.
Is that how much the tower costs? Sorry. Sam Whitfield.
Sure. I'll let Nikki come back in a minute, perhaps, about I guess why an 8-year age gap is better than a 10. But in terms of kind of the Clean Air Fund bid and getting that $500,000, it's just about creating a narrative to government that shows that we are taking it seriously and that, we are putting sufficient measures in place that that do lead to cleaner air. And I see Hayley's got her hand up.
Thank you. Hello, Hayley.
Thanks, Chair. Without going into details about amounts of emissions, older vehicles do create more emissions, and I think with all of this we have to remember we've got a legal requirement to meet the legal limits for nitrogen dioxide in the shortest possible time, and the clean air zone will stay in place until we've met those limits and are able to maintain those limits. So the more older vehicles we have on the road, whether they're taxis, private hires, private vehicles, lorries, whatever it is, the longer it's going to take us to achieve compliance. So there's that correlation between if we encourage younger, newer vehicles on the road, we are likely to have the clean air zone in for less time. So it's simple. Thank you.
Leo, did you want to come back on that point at all?
Yeah, I accept all that. I mean, I've read the papers. I can see what the problems and the issues are. But what we're trying to do is seek a political resolution today. I mean, it's everybody agrees with the need for clean air and all the rest of it. There may be issues over whether the cars is big enough or not. But at the end of the day, it's if the taxi trade are concerned, and I don't blame them about people needing to buy new vehicles and all the rest of it. I know we've got to do things as soon as possible, but I did ask, and I haven't had a reply to what the material difference would be to making older vehicles 10 years rather than 8 years.
Who can answer that? Oh, Nikki, hello.
Members, to answer that question, I know Ross covered it earlier in terms of data. We do have monthly reports back from our garage in terms of looking at vehicles' age profile and whether they are meeting the standards that you expect for vehicles licensed by Portsmouth. And unfortunately, the practical information, the data that we have, does say that on a month-by-month basis, vehicles that are older will fail more significantly than newer vehicles. These vehicles are out on the road, I know, let's go pre-COVID, but when we all get back together again, these vehicles are being used massively around the city. It is a choice by residents that they would prefer to travel by taxi. Sometimes it's cheaper for people to use taxis and private hire vehicles to get around the city than public transport. So these vehicles are going to be subject to more use than what a normal vehicle would be expecting. I can say to you that for vehicles that I'm going to look at last month, because that's as much as up to date as I can give you, is that for vehicles over 8 years old, for Hackney vehicles, those vehicles that were 8 years old were failing on their annual inspection. So these vehicles know that this vehicle, the inspection is coming, very much like it's their MOT, and even having that prior knowledge, 67% of vehicles over 8 years old for Hackneys, and for private hire, 63% of vehicles over 8 years old are failing. Now, it's really a choice for you members to say you have a high standard in terms of the vehicles and their the standards that you expect from licensed vehicles, and it's up to you to decide that what we will see is if we extend that period beyond 8 years or 10 years, undoubtedly there will be an increase in failure rates of those vehicles, which could be at detriment to the travelling public, because your tests look not just at the MOT requirements, but they look at comfort for the travelling customer. You could see that those vehicles were likely to be failing more. That could mean those vehicles are likely to be off the road longer, because those vehicles, if it's failing, then those licenses are suspended until such times as works are done to bring that vehicle back in line with your requirements and the pattern guidance. And that potentially, we do not want drivers off the road because the vehicles are not mechanically and suitably suitable for the travelling public. So I would really like to reinforce the message that by taking those vehicles older, you will present with further difficulties with failures, and in a roundabout way at the detriment of the trade. And I can see Ross has perhaps put his hand up in case he can add more to the advice I've given you, then yeah, if he's got more data that he can give you.
Hello, Ross. Thank you, Nikki. Ross? No? I'm going to move on. Hayley's got a hand up. So
hello.
I beg your pardon.
Oh no, Ross is back. Ross is back. Hello.
Sorry, Chair, I was on mute. I just wanted to just remind you, and I know Ben would have the same thought as your legal advisor, that if you were to reintroduce an upper age limit policy, it guides you but doesn't bind you. So some members will remember in the past that you've had some really good older vehicles that the proprietors have put their hand up and said, look, I think I'm an exception to the rule. I want you to judge my vehicle on its own merit because it's so damn good and I keep it in an excellent mechanical condition. And you said yes. So the upper age limit is there as a guideline to help officers and the committee and the trade know what the standards are. But there's always somebody that can say on individual merit, I'm better than the rest of the pack. So it's not unreasonable at all to have an upper age limit, provided you can show some flexibility. But just echoing what Nikki said, the Hackney Carriage older vehicle failure rate in 2020 is extremely poor and has been consistently. The older TX style vehicles are not faring well. They've got between 200,000 and 400,000 miles on the clock. Some of them pre-COVID were double manned working vehicles, and they have been struggling mechanically and cosmetically. And that's why you've always had previously an upper age limit.
Thank you. Did Hayley want to say something before we go back to Leo and then to Scott?
Yeah, it was just a quick one really to come back in terms of the material impact of the age difference. So just to give you a bit of context, for a diesel Euro 5 vehicle, they emit about 0.18 grams of nitrogen oxide per kilometre, whereas for a Euro 6 it's 0.08 grams per kilometre. So it's double the amount of emissions of NOx if you go to that Euro 5 level. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Madden.
Well, thank you, Chair. I do respect everything everybody said, but I still haven't got an answer to the question I asked in the first place. I accept all this, and I accept that vehicles, older vehicles, are going to pollute and all the rest of it, but that's not the question I asked. And my question, because we have the recommendations in front of us, and all I'm saying is, if one recommendation were changed, because non-compliant vehicles can't be on the road anyway. So you know, we've got to accept that, right? But I'm just thinking, and what we've done, and what members did 2 weeks ago was say, come back with something different because of what we said, and that was agreed, and actually we've come back with nothing different at all in effect. And I hope we're going to get an update at some stage on the wheelchair vehicles, by the way, which were promised under 2.5, because I think that's probably more important to me than the rest of the report in a way, because we're looking at disadvantaged people in the community. If, given that vehicles have to be compliant, could all we need, if just today, and I'm just putting this again, the material difference, i.e., and I mean, and perhaps I didn't say it in the first place, to all the other recommendations and applying for funding, would it make any difference? Because non-compliant vehicles can't go on the road anyway. Most of them, I hope, will be under 8 years of age, because that may happen, and of course, with newer vehicles, as people say, they're much better. If that were changed to 10 years, would it make any material difference to the rest of the recommendations?
Who's able to answer that? Hayley?
Yeah, I can come in on that one. And apologies, I think we misunderstood your question, hence my response about material impacts on nitrogen dioxide. So, yeah, material difference in terms of the other recommendations. As Sam explained, we need to demonstrate to central government that we're taking this issue seriously so that we can unlock the funding for the rapid EV charge points. So I think if you were to make a decision that you're actually not going to reduce the upper age limit for relicensed vehicles as far, I think JACU, who are the central government department we deal with, are very likely to say, no, you cannot have the funding for the rapid EV charge points. Their advice to us was that we need, as a minimum, that requirement for zero emission capable vehicles. When we said to them that we were proposing that for 2025, their response was, can you do that sooner? And our faith was much like Chair's. We didn't think that that would go down particularly well given the feedback we've had from the trade. So in answer to your question, yes, it would make a material difference. It's very likely that by changing it to 10 years for relicensed, we would not secure that funding. Thank you.
Oh, blimey. Councillor Madden, do you have anything to add before I move on to Councillor Peter-Harris?
Even if I had, I wouldn't. Thank you.
Never change, Leo. Thank you. Councillor Peter-Harris.
Yeah, no, Councillor Madden's there. He's made me smile this morning. No, I think Councillor Madden's touched on a point of 2.5, which, funnily enough, in the report comes before 2.4, which doesn't make any sense in my papers that I'm reading, about the verbal update regarding wheelchair accessible vehicles. So I think we need to have that update, and I think that was promised, so hopefully we can. But I go along with what Councillor Madden's saying, actually, regarding the recommendations. I also note that, effectively, as Bruce has put, a 5-year-old vehicle could be registered from another neighbouring authority and effectively be compliant, I imagine, and be able to work in the city. Would someone be able to clarify if that is the case?
Anyone?
Hi. If the vehicle is compliant, then they would be able to operate within the city, just like our vehicles would be able to, but they wouldn't be necessarily eligible for the funding the vehicle's licence from Portsmouth would be.
No, so a vehicle effectively could be a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old vehicle that is within compliance from registered in a neighbouring borough and could effectively come and work in Portsmouth all day, while our drivers would not be able to register that age of vehicle in this city under this recommendation. Is that correct?
It depends what the neighbouring authority restrictions are.
Trust me, they're much more lax than us. So that's why I make the point. So effectively, you could register in a neighbouring borough, and I'm not going to name any of them, and work in the city. But then a car that is working in Portsmouth daily, effectively could go outside the city and take off its money with it. But we can't register a 5-year-old vehicle in Portsmouth to work in Portsmouth for Portsmouth people because of our policy. That's effectively what this recommendation is asking.
Well, I think what you'd see is Portsmouth licensed vehicles are more likely to be working and operating in Portsmouth than vehicles licensed in other boroughs, and so they're going to have a bigger impact on air quality.
I would beg to differ, Sam, on the issue of cross-border hiring, which is prevalent across the city. And I think if you speak to any taxi driver, they would say they suffer from cross-border hiring all the time. So I think on that issue, I respectfully disagree on that issue. But yeah, I think Leo touched on that point about the age of vehicles, but the nature of that is going to allow somebody from neighbouring authority to come and work in Portsmouth knowing that they can, and our vehicles can't get licensed here. All I see is our drivers going to neighbouring authorities and licensing an older vehicle and then coming back and working in the city. It's not rocket science. You can see it's going to happen.
I must add about the material job losses that would impact the licensing department as well. Exactly. Anyway,
I think you make actually an excellent point, because that would impact on our licensing department as a team, because obviously it's a self-funding service.
Thank you. Councillor Vernon Jackson, I did see a hand.
Yeah, Councillor Peter-Harris asked for the update about wheelchair accessible vehicles. So we had a meeting to look at this, to update things from the cabinet decision. So the clean air zone goes in, a very flawed government scheme, but imposed upon us by the government in 2021. The modelling, as I understand it, says that without the clean air zone, Portsmouth would reach compliance in 2023, but with it we will reach it in 2022. And once we've got to compliance and we've shown that that's sustainable, the clean air zone is removed. So I think we all hope that that'll be removed in 2022, but the government will have spent 25 million quid putting it in. So we were looking at what length of time to give wheelchair accessible vehicles right to run through the clean air zone without paying the charge. and we looked at that, and one of the deciding factors in it was the level of grant we could give people with those vehicles to be able to change their vehicles to one that is meets the needs of the clean air zone. The advice we had is if we went for a long period, like 2 years, that the government would not fund any grants. They've currently agreed £4,000 grant per vehicle to be able to change them. We've applied to the government and said we think it should be £15,000, and let's hope that the government can agree to that and be generous. And on the basis that those grants would not be available to owners of CADs, if we went for a longer period, we opted for the 6-month period that they would be able to not be charged, so that they could access as large a grant as possible to be able to change their vehicles. I hope that is helpful and is the update that colleagues were expecting.
Thank you, Councillor Bernard-Jackson. Nikki, is that a legacy hand? I assume that it is.
Members, it is. I do apologise.
That's fine. Councillor Ashmore.
There we are. No, I was going to say, talking about ages of vehicles and if taxis licensed in another area, or private hires licensed in another area, sorry, if they could come in to our authority, essentially that's something we can't control. But it is one of those things where it's between a rock and a hard place, isn't it? Because that theoretically could be possible, but if we don't go with the recommendations today, and I know we have tighter licensing restrictions, I am minded of it. If we don't go for that today, then the funding that we're trying to fight for the trade could well be at stake. So while neighbouring authorities might have less stricter rules than us, if I put it like that, we might still end up out, or the trade would still end up out of pocket if we don't pursue this, because as has been said several times now, I think by the officers, the legal requirement is we need to go to the cleanest air in the shortest possible time. Otherwise, Jack, you will say we're not taking it seriously. So I do get that caught between rock and a hard place. I do get why councillors are, and I said it in an earlier meeting with Scott. As an environment cabinet person, I want to see cleaner air ASAP, but I also come from the same working class background as a lot of these drivers, so I can understand why they're being vociferous about this. But yeah, it is that rock and a hard place thing, but essentially it's the funding we're trying to fight for, which is why we've got to be rigorous.
Thank you, Councillor Ashmore. Councillor Mason.
Hi, thank you much. At the last meeting, we were told by officers, and had it confirmed because I did check with them several times, that I think we even had it recorded in our notice of motion, that the 600k was already there and was safe regardless. And that this was about money for the EV points. So can I just have that confirmed? Because Councillor Bernard-Jackson alluded that we were putting the 600k at risk.
No, that £600,000 is safeguarded. Well, what Councillor?
So it's in the bank. We have it 100%.
Yeah,
and that's not a risk.
No, but what Councillor Bernard-Jackson was saying is just that in order for our wheelchair accessible vehicles to be able to access that money, we've gone with a 6-month sunset period rather than a 2-year, and that's a decision that has been made into delegated authority by Cabinet already.
But it's not to do with about losing the 600k. We got the 600k regardless, so it's not putting that at risk if we were to go for a different option
today. No, that is a separate issue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason. I have no other people requesting to speak, but I guess we're going to go into comments. Members, I want to break for 30 seconds because I really need a quick comfort break and I don't think I can hold it, and I'm very, very sorry. So 30 seconds. Members, thank you for letting me do that then. I should not have drunk 2 coffees before this meeting. Members' comments at this present stage? I have nothing in the chat. Don't make me talk. Oh, Councillor Lee Mason, is that? Please tell me that's not a legacy hand.
I'm afraid that is a legacy hand, sorry.
Members,
Oh.
thank you. Councillor Madden, thank goodness.
Oh, sorry, Chair. Yes, I'm getting back in there. Yeah, I mean, although my question appeared to be an awkward one, I just want to make sense of what we're trying to do today. You know, we all have a responsibility towards climate change. We all have a responsibility towards the health and well-being of our people and the people who visit Portsmouth. And I think, to be fair to the officers, because I know the officers well, and they would have gone away to see if there was any way in which a compromise could have happened, and clearly not. The monies, I understood the monies to be the $500,000 for the electric vehicles. I just want to know if there was some compromise in relation to the 8 to 10 years, and I'm satisfied that there isn't. I'm satisfied that the recommendations in front of us are the recommendations we should go forward. I've never been one not to go after money from central government or from any other source. And if we're moving towards electrical vehicles, I can't quite see myself driving one, but nevertheless we are, we should not turn down £500,000. And we also don't want to give the impression to government, and you know, I keep saying this, you know, local authorities work with government of whatever colour when it is to the well-being of their people. And in this case, the government are quite right, working with other countries, of course, to say that we need to do something about air pollution. Having looked at this, at the end of the day, what we will see are new vehicles coming on board with help and assistance from the government. And I think if monies have been put in jeopardy for the sake of a year or what, or so, we shouldn't do that. So I think, having listened to what material difference it would make if we change the upper limit for vehicles, that we could jeopardise the funding. In fact, I think we said we will not have the funding or cannot have the funding if we don't give, and not the impression, but actually the determination that we are determined to do something. And what JSAQ have said, that they want things done as quickly as possible. So, Chair, I will move the recommendations in the knowledge that the licensing and other parts of the council which need to do so will talk very strongly with the taxi trade and make sure that we improve the health of people of Portsmouth. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Madden. I'm going to go to Councillor Vasakili first because his hand was up before Councillor Pettis Harris said request to speak. Sorry, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Apologies still for having no camera access. The point that struck me is obviously attending the last meeting, having heard what members said then, we came back today, has already been touched on. I don't see any real fundamental change in what we've got now to what we've had before. And what still irks with me is that you have from Bruce Hall, obviously Aqua being the major player for private hire taxis within Portsmouth, a whole list of concerns that he's raised, and I haven't seen any of those discredited during the course of today's meeting. And this, to me, yes, there's the issue of the 500,000, the 600k has been clarified as we've got that, so no problem. So we're balancing losing, potentially, not definitely, but likely to lose 500k funding for electric vehicles, or balanced against that is us agreeing to in effect incur potential financial hardship to a whole host of our resident drivers. These are the people in the city that we're supposed to be representing. Now, I know it's a bigger picture, you need to look at the implications of clean air balanced against impact on in this instance, taxi drivers. But for goodness sakes, they've been going through and are still going through a pandemic which has obviously hit them as much as it's hit lots of other businesses and organisations as well. There's only an offer of 4k at the moment available from central government to assist in making taxis, you know, assisting taxis and changing over. So it doesn't sit easy in my heart, and I don't feel comfortable to basically support this, because I don't think it's fair that we're balancing such a hit on our residents, our taxi drivers. So I'm afraid I can't support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zackley. Councillor Peter Harris.
I think Councillor Zackley has touched on a balance needs to be struck, and this is a very, I mean, Bruce Hall articulated it better than anyone. It's probably one of the best deputations I've actually seen given to a licensing committee from terms of going through the points of the report, and I think he should be commended on that. But I think Jason has just actually hit the nail on the head. I think a lot of the stuff that Bruce has put forward hasn't been robustly discredited today, and that is an issue for me. Also, I think Jason has just made reference to the fact that Aquacars are one of the biggest proprietors in the city for our taxi drivers. I think it's between them and Uber for the two private hire companies. And I think Aqua potentially, this could be a death blow for them. And it could be actually quite a big issue for the licensing department. Because if they choose to take their drivers elsewhere, which could be a possible outcome of this this decision today, would cause significant hardship not to us as a council, but across the city, because Aqua are providing a very strong service. I also believe that there are movements to be made in the report, which is why I actually am going to propose an amendment today to change 1I from under 40-year age limits to under 6, and on 1, 2, I'm going to change that to any vehicle must be licensed up to 10 years of age. I'm going to put that forward because I think there should be a compromise to this, and I think we should not be putting our drivers at risk and basically putting them out of a job. And we have to strike a balance, obviously, with the clean air. And I think Dave Ashmore has put some very strong points ahead. But I do believe that we need to try and do something to help our trade in the longer term. And I would feel very uncomfortable with the recommendations as they are. So I propose the amendment, and I hope I have a seconder. I'm sure I will do. But yeah, that's all from me, Chair, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ashmore.
I can see why Councillor Peter Harris has put those amendments in. I can, you know, as I said, I can hear what the trade is saying. But I can also, as Councillor Madden has put, about it's, you know, you've got to deal with the world as it is rather than as you want it to be. And I think, like I was saying earlier about caught between rock and a hard place, I think given the government's the government department, Jack, who's saying we need to be as quick as possible, and we need to show fierce commitment to it. I'm minded to second what Councillor Madden has suggested. So I just want to put that on there. Thank you.
Oh, to admit then, thank you, Councillor Ashmore. Councillor Lee Mason.
Hi, thank you very much, Chair. Just a very quick one, just to say I'm happy to second Scott's proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a quick question. If we change it to 6 years, would that come into order? So is it 6 years? So I'm mindful, was it what Euro standard came in at 2015? I'm mindful if it was 6 years. I know it would probably override that by the point that we get to the end of 2021 if we acknowledged a 6-year policy on first registration. Hello, Sam.
Hi. Sorry, yes, just to say September 2015 that Euro 6 was introduced.
Nikki.
Thank you, Chair. As information for members in terms of looking at the potential impacts on the taxi trade, because I know that is close to their hearts in terms of the effects, I just wanted to confirm as part of the report that we're not talking about the whole fleet of licensed vehicles for Portsmouth. So we have 234 taxis, hackney carriages, and we have around 900,000 private hire vehicles.
You said 900,000, Nikki.
Stop. I'll do my words properly. I wish we had 900,000 because that would be a lot of employment. 900 to 1,000 licensed vehicles. And I'm going to say pre-COVID because obviously we haven't renewed private hires yet. But we are talking of that total fleet of 1,200 vehicles approximately. There are only 321 vehicles that are non-compliant. And I don't know whether to again aid your discussions, whether Alex could split that total down into whether that's private hire or Hackney carriage, because I know you were looking at wheelchair accessible vehicles. So would that assist, Chair, in terms of your discussions over the issue?
If you want to do it right now, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So in terms of non-compliance, that is those that will be charged from November next year. That's 108 Hackney carriages, and 52 of those are wheelchair accessible vehicles. The remainder of the non-compliance are private hire, and 6 of those are wheelchair accessible that are non-compliant.
Thank you. Hayley, hello.
Hello, it was just a point of clarification on the amendment to the recommendation as proposed by Councillor Peter Harris. As I alluded to in my response to Councillor Madden earlier, if we move away from current policy, i.e. the 4 years for newly licensed, we won't be able to secure the funding for the rapid EV charge points. So I just want to make that very clear, that if we have, if we make a recommendation that worsens existing policy, we will not get that funding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going in, I guess we're going to be doing name votes at this point. I'm going to go in order as where they were proposed. So if no one else is speaking, I will move to a vote. I am bringing up Councillor Madden's.
Sorry. Could we have an update on the meeting that took place on the 18th of December before we go to the vote? Because it's actually one of the recommendations in the on the paper. It's the meeting with the Disability Forum.
Hello.
Leo, I did that. I did that a little time ago. Happy to go through it again if that's of use. But just saying that to make sure that the decision was to, at the moment, people, each taxi driver can access £4,000 to be able to upgrade their vehicle. But if we go for a longer period, then that won't be available. And we've written to government to bid to increase that from 4,000 to 15,000. And again, my understanding is if we gave a longer time when they're not being charged, that would not be available. So to try to make sure to support the trade and make sure they get the extra funding from the government, we went for 6 months only for them not being charged. And I got a very positive response to that from the trade.
Thank you. I suspected you would, Chair, but I just wanted to. It said it would be an update. Could I just confirm then what Hayley said? Because she said it to me and she said it again. If we go with recommendation 1.1 to change the anywhere from the 4 years upwards, we will not get the £500,000 for electrical vehicle, for the electrical vehicle charge.
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
I.e., sorry, what I'm trying to say is that we mightn't get it, or it might be difficult to get it. We definitely won't get it.
Yeah, the current advice from central government is it needs to be a reduction in current licensing policy, and we need to have that zero emission capable element in there. And just a point of clarification, the update on the wheelchair accessible vehicles were in the slides at the beginning, so I'm not sure if it would be helpful for us to bring those up again, just for clarity, if that helps, Chair.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I didn't know you could send PowerPoints in the chat. How amazing is that? It's 20th century, isn't it? So there's PowerPoint in the chat that you can access. Thank you very much. Councillor Peter Harris' hand was up before the RTS from Councillor New. So.
Go for Councillor New first, Chair. I'm just reading something for clarification.
Thank you very much. Councillor New.
Thank you, Chair. It's just really to follow on from Councillor Madden, just because that seems it's more a question for clarification from Hayley. So are you saying to us absolutely that if we were to follow Councillor Peter Harris's recommendation to slightly increase this, that it would be just point blank refused? Because my experience of government departments is if you make the case for why a department or has reached that decision, that they would certainly give it consideration, and there possibly may be an agreement through that. I don't think it's as black and white as what you're perhaps leading the committee to understand. If you could just clarify that, please.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I mean, I can only share with you the advice we've received from central government, which is that they need a tightening of licensing restrictions and a requirement for zero emission capable vehicles. Obviously, if this committee would like officers to go ahead with the recommendation put forward by Councillor Pater Harris, we will do that and make the best argument we can for that. But it's just to make you aware and manage expectations that that is the advice we've received from government.
Thank you. Councillor Pater Harris.
Yeah, that's just moving on from Councillor New's point, because it comes across as a bit of an absolute from Hayley. Well, actually, I think Councillor New's actually articulated the point of how government departments work, and he would have a lot more experience of dealing with government departments than probably most people in this room. So I stress that fact because I'm looking in the report, and there's no absolute in the report. So I think it's misleading to the committee to say it's an absolute right here and now. So I actually think the officer should be very careful in saying that.
I'm going to move to the vote. Thank you very much. So I have the officer's recommendation as proposed by Councillor Madden and seconded by Councillor Ashmore. I already know it's going to a name vote, so I will go through it all. Peter, are you listening in to Margaret or Dan?
Sorry, yeah, I can take notes.
Oh, thank you. So if the vote is for the officer's recommendations, I will start with. Is it amendment first? Okay, we'll go for amendment. Okay, we're going for the amendment here, which is Councillor Scott Pater Harris's amendment, wherein R1.I we are changing from 4 years of age to 6 years of age, and 1.II from 8 years of age to 10 years of age. Can I just have a nod for that being correct? We'll go for a named vote. I'm just getting my list up. So you'll be voting for the amendment or against the amendment. Councillor Scott Pater Harris.
For, Chair. It'd be a bit daft if I voted against.
Thank you. So Councillor Dave Ashmore.
I'll have to go against it as I'm seconding the other one.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chris Atwell.
Against, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tom Coles.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Jason Fasakali.
For.
Thank you. Councillor John Ferret.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor George Fielding.
Against, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hannah Hockaday.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Leo Madden.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Lee Mason.
For, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Robert New.
For, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Benedict Swan.
For, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Linda Symes.
For.
Was that a cat? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's our cat.
And I will vote against the proposed amendment. I think that is carried, though. Is that right?
Chair, could you just record my abstention?
Thank you very much. Sorry, Councillor Brennan Jackson.
Thank you.
Have you tallied the numbers up, Chair?
I was hoping Lisa was going to do that.
Sorry, Chair. I'm just double checking I've got it right. Yeah, so we've got 7 for and 6 against.
And that ends the license, and that is carried, and that ends the licensing meeting today. Thank you for attending. Feliz Navidad, and I will see you all in the new year. Thank you very much. Peter, can you turn off the meeting, please? Thank you.
Thank you all. Will do, Chair.
Have a good Christmas.
Thank you very much, Chair. Merry Christmas, everyone.